All right, let's dive deep into the world of real-time applications. Today, we're going to break down the architecture of how modern apps deliver information instantly. Moving from some of those older, clunky methods to the super powerful protocols that pretty much run the web today.
I mean, think about it for a second. When you see stock prices update in a flash, or maybe you're editing a Google Doc with a colleague and you see their changes appear literally as they're typing, what's the magic behind that? Well, it's not magic, it's just some seriously clever engineering.
Okay, here's our game plan for today. We're going to start with the why we even need real time. Then we'll get into the core engineering challenge. We're going to look at some old, kind of broken methods, and then the fun part. We'll unbox the modern tools that fixed everything. I'll even give you a clear framework for choosing the right tool for the job. And we'll wrap it all up by talking about the architect's mindset, which is absolutely crucial.
You see, the classic web was kind of like a library. You ask for a book, that's a request, the server gives it to you, and that's it. The conversation is over. But modern users, well, we expect a real conversation. We want those low-latency, server-pushed updates. The server needs to be able to talk to us the moment something happens, and that completely shatters that old request-response model. And this right here, this brings us to the single biggest hurdle that engineers face when they're building real-time systems. It's this massive, fundamental shift in how we think about the connection between a user and a server.
Yeah, this quote just nails it. It's not just about learning a new technology, it's about adopting a completely different mindset. You're moving from these fleeting, forgetful interactions to, well, long-term relationships between the client and the server.
And this slide lays it out perfectly. On the left, you've got traditional HTTP. It basically has amnesia. Every single request is like meeting for the first time. The server has no idea who you are from one moment to the next. But on the right, with stateful connections, the server actually remembers you. There's a persistent link, a real connection, which is incredibly powerful, but also really complex to manage when you scale up.
So before we had all the cool tools we have today, developers had to get pretty creative to try and fake real-time behavior. These early attempts are what we now call anti-patterns. And that's just a fancy way of saying the wrong way to solve the problem. But it's so important to understand why they fail.
First up was short polling. Just imagine a kid in the back of a car asking, "Are we there yet?" every 5 seconds. That's short polling. The client just hammers the server with requests over and over. And the flaw is pretty obvious, right? It's incredibly wasteful. Every poll creates a whole new connection, sending the same headers again and again, and just chewing up server CPU, even when there's absolutely nothing new to report. It's a huge drain on resources.
So next, developers tried long polling. This seems a little smarter. The client asks, and the server just holds the connection open, basically saying, "Hang on, I'll let you know." Now this does cut down on latency, which is good, but it creates this massive scaling bottleneck. See, every single person waiting for an update ties up a server thread. And if you have thousands of users, your server's resources just get completely exhausted fast.
Okay, so after being frustrated with all those limitations, engineers finally developed standardized protocols that were designed from the ground up for this kind of real-time, stateful communication. Now, this is where things get really interesting.
First up, we've got server-sent events, or SSE. Think of it as a one-way street for data to flow from the server to the client. It's the perfect tool for things like live news tickers or those updating dashboards. And because it's built on standard HTTP, it plays nice with firewalls and even has a handy auto reconnect feature built right in. It's simple and it's really effective.
But what if you need a two-way conversation? Well, for that, you need WebSockets. A WebSocket connection starts its life as a normal HTTP request, but it asks for an upgrade. If the server agrees, that connection magically transforms into a persistent two-way data pipe between the client and the server. It's a true full duplex communication channel.
And here's the catch. This is the big one. WebSockets solve the communication problem, but they make the statefulness problem much bigger. Why? Because that connection is a physical tie to one specific server's memory. So if you have a whole cluster of servers, how does a message that arrives at server A get to a user who's connected to server B? This is the core engineering hurdle you have to solve.
And that brings us to the heavyweight champion of real-time, WebRTC. This isn't just for sending little text messages. This is designed for high-bandwidth media, like audio and video. And its killer feature? It establishes a direct peer-to-peer connection between browsers. The data doesn't even flow through your server. It goes straight from me to you. And that dramatically reduces your bandwidth costs.
This slide breaks down WebRTC beautifully. You've basically got two parts. First, there's the signaling plane. This is like the coordination layer where clients use your server to find each other and swap connection details. Once that's done, the media plane takes over. This is where the actual video and audio data flows directly between the users over UDP, a protocol that's all about speed, which is exactly what you want for real-time media.
Okay, that sounds amazing, right? But of course, there's a problem. A big one. The internet isn't just this wide-open space. Most of us are sitting behind routers and firewalls that are literally designed to block these exact kinds of direct, uninvited connections. So, how does WebRTC get through?
These barriers are called Network Address Translation, or NAT, and firewalls. NAT was originally invented to help conserve IP addresses, but it has this major side effect. It hides your device's true address from the public internet, and that makes it incredibly difficult for another user's computer to find yours directly.
So to get around this, WebRTC uses this clever little tool called a stun server. The best way to think about it is like a digital mirror. Your computer asks the stun server, hey, what do I look like to the rest of the internet? And the stun server simply replies with your public IP address and port. It helps you see yourself from the outside.
But sometimes, especially if you're on a restrictive corporate network, even a stun server isn't enough. For those really tough cases, we bring in the big guns, the turn server. If a direct connection is just impossible, the turn server acts as a middleman, relaying all the media between the two clients. It guarantees a connection will be made, but because all that data is now flowing through your server, it comes at a much, much higher cost.
And the thing that orchestrates all of these pieces is a framework called ICE, which stands for Interactive Connectivity Establishment. It's just a systematic process. ICE tries the simplest thing first, a direct connection. If that doesn't work, it escalates to using a stun server. And if all else fails, it falls back to that expensive but super reliable turn server. It's like this waterfall of attempts to find any possible path for the media to flow.
Okay, wow, we've covered a ton of ground. We've seen polling, SSE, WebSockets, and WebRTC. So, as an architect or an engineer, how in the world do you choose? Well, that brings us to the decision matrix.
This slide right here is your cheat sheet. It's all about trade-offs. You know, for a quick low-traffic prototype, maybe polling is fine. For a live dashboard, SSE is perfect. Simple, effective. For chat or collaborative editing, you absolutely need the bidirectional power of WebSockets, but you better be planning for how to scale it. And for video conferencing, WebRTC is the undisputed king. It offloads your bandwidth, but it demands a more complex setup. The right choice? It totally depends on the specific problem you're trying to solve.
So we've looked at all the tools, but let's wrap up with what I think is the most important part of all. Building robust, scalable, real-time systems isn't just about picking a protocol from a chart. It's really about adopting a specific architectural philosophy.
And this quote just says it all. Look, getting a real-time app to work on your laptop with one server, that's easy. That's a prototype. Building a production-ready system that can handle thousands or even millions of users requires thinking about distribution, state management, and resilience from day one. And that's the difference between a science experiment and a real product. That is the true challenge and the true art of architecting real-time systems.